You're listening to Police Life, The Experts, a Victoria Police podcast shining a light on our people and their extraordinary skills.
This podcast episode contains references to mental health issues and other potentially distressing content. Listener discretion is advised.
I think this role is a real privilege. Not only do we get to be part of the best and worst days of the community's lives, but as a sergeant, it's kind of a little bit like being a parent. And you raise your troops and you raise them up and you give them good skills and you teach them good lessons, and then they go on and be amazing police officers themselves. Which that's a real privilege, I think.
A sergeant in Victoria Police plays a critical role in leadership, command and control. They are the link between the members on the ground and the higher ranks. While sergeants perform a variety of duties, the one most critical to the day-to-day police response is known as the 251 sergeant. 251 is the call sign used on police radio to signify the patrol supervisor of a police service area for any given shift. It sounds simple enough, but it's one of the toughest gigs in modern day policing.
Murder 251, I'm going to give you a search pattern and then I want you to come back to me with units that I've got available. I'll give you a search pattern now. Give me units when you've got them available. Received?
The 251 is responsible for the supervision and welfare of troops on patrol in their patch, for deciding which police units go where and when, and ultimately for keeping their community safe. It's a role fundamental to the way Victoria Police functions every day. On the front line, when decisions have to be made, it's the 251 sergeant who everyone looks to.
My name is Dani Muntz. I'm a sergeant at Greensborough uniform. I've been in the job since 2014. I started off as a PSO actually, Protective Services Officer. It was a quicker route to actually enter the force that way than it was to be a copper at the time, but this was always the end game.
I'm Dan Maffei. I'm a sergeant. I work at the Muntz Police Station. I've been in the force for 25 years. You get a lot of successes in this job. Night shift's a prime example. We catch a lot of crooks on night shift, and it's great fun and it's a great reward when you get it. I've never played in the grand final, but I imagine it'd be something similar to that.
Dani and Dan are at different stages of their policing career, but both are rated by their bosses and colleagues in Melbourne's northeast as outstanding sergeants. But that doesn't mean they're cut from the same cloth. Like all good supervisors, they each have their own style. While the 251 sergeant generally begins their shift behind a desk, it's no secret that Dan is always itching to get out on the road.
I do a morning tour. If I'm the morning 251, I get in the car after I've briefed everyone up and I just drive, go around. You still find the shop window that's been broken that hasn't been reported. You still find the dump stolen car in the back street that no one's rang up you about. And you say, I remember that car. I saw it the other day when I was just going for a drive. So you make a mental note of things that just look out of place. And that's an old school tool that was taught to me and I still love doing it.
I'm probably less of the 251 that goes out on the road, only because I like to be at the desk with the tools that we have at our disposal. We had a job recently where I sent the guys going out to a guy who was having a psych episode that had only sort of marginally been reported here and there. And so it didn't really flag on our system, but there was notes in what we call a dossier. So I was able to go into the dossier, which you can't sort of see on the road as easily, and read the comments from previous officers that have put on notes that said, he suffers from these diagnoses. This is his usual MO. I was able to ring the complainant and say, what's actually going on tonight? Like, how are you? We can't get a unit there right now, but what's going on? And he was telling me, that they'd smashed up the place, this sort of stuff, all this sort of information. So I was able to gather information from the desk and then risk assess that and say to the troops, I need someone to go there right now, but I want 2 units. I want someone with a taser because he's got a knife. He is having a psych episode. He has a bunch of diagnoses which will make him more resistant to us and very combative. So I don't want any arguments. Just go in there, arrest him. And if you need to use your options, taser him, go for it. Use the less lethal option to effect the arrest. And speaking to the complainant, when I said to him, he'll be arrested tonight. I just can't get a unit right there in the next 5 minutes. It will be in the next half an hour. Make sure you're safe, stand out the front, which he did. But being able to manage that from the office, for me, I was able to keep it nice and calm, gather all the information, gather all the details that I needed to keep them safe, the victim safe, and the offender corralled into one area. The guys moved in really quickly after that. They were there within 20 minutes. The victim was actually, the complainant was on the phone, and I said to him, he'll be arrested tonight, he'll be taken away, we'll do an intervention order, he's not coming back to the house tonight. And he actually burst into tears on the phone and he said to me, I'm okay, I can wait now for 20 minutes. It's okay. Knowing that you guys are going to take him away tonight and he's not coming back. He's my stepson, but he can't be here anymore. I can't deal with his family violence anymore. So being able to be that removed from the desk, have all that handled, and then I went out and that was fine after that. So I'm the family violence liaison officer at our station. So every station has one. It's that everyday trauma that people are going through with the family violence. And some of them are lesser than others, but there's some really decent family violence offenders in our area. And they're the ones that you worry about and go, is this going to turn into a murder next shift? So for me, I like to know who my family violence offenders are in my area. Probably for us, that in our area, that's the biggest problem. We're going to at least 2 or 3 jobs a shift with family violence.
So I work at Mernda, but it's the Whittlesea Police Service area, which encompasses Epping Police Station, Mill Park, ourselves, Mernda, and Whittlesea. We get a lot of, we're high on the family violence as well, but we get a lot of property crime, a lot of aggravated burglaries are starting to pop up a lot more, a lot of theft of motor cars. We've got a train line that runs right through the middle of our patch, and we're a pretty good thoroughfare from the west coming into us. So we border with Craigieburn and Faulkner and Hume and those sort of really busy areas.
On January 4th, 2024, Dan received a report of a man with a gun on the street. He was already on the road for another job when this higher priority situation arose.
241, go ahead.
Got a priority 1 firearm incident coming in at complainant says there's a male outside his house with a firearm.
See that.
With this firearm incident unfolding, Dan switched his focus, leaving other units to pick up his original job.
Received that. Alright, we might have to abandon this job then. I'll let the Kiwis and the Trinity units play around with this one. Myself, Mill Park and Epping will clear and we'll head to that job. Keep giving us details if you can.
Come through priority 1, no shots fired, 2 sus males outside, got actually 4 males. Complainant says that they're there to extort her son. Not known to the complainant, 1 firearm sighted, no shots fired, still on the phone.
See that. At this stage, we'll put the uniform units in a staging area close by, but out of sight. I'm happy to do a drive over myself just to see what the state play is. I'll keep uniform units away at this stage, just until we get some eyeballs on the court itself, and then I'll get everyone to come in.
By the time Dan arrived on the scene, the crooks were on the move, so he and his offsider began to follow a black van.
Turned at 251. I've just got that black van. It's now heading eastbound on Findon Road. I'm tipping they might be our crooks' pursuits. I'm just going to follow from a distance. We're about 200 metres behind them at this stage, approaching a roundabout.
CD, gotcha.
Dan then turned to planning the operation, a mobile intercept which would likely involve the dog squad and the critical incident response team.
And 241, just a notification at this stage for K9, if I've got one available, and CERT, please.
He then called for extra resources from detectives working nearby, using their radio call signs of 545 and 555.
251, I'll keep the other units going in that direction. How far off is 555 or 545? I'm not keen on letting this van out of my sight.
North 545, 555, 251 received. I think Epping's going to be the closest. Where did you want them?
Just trying to get a map up as I'm driving, so stand by.
While Dan was tailing the armed offenders, he remained the 251 sergeant, managing the police response to all the other jobs in his patch. It's a precarious juggling act, and it's not for the faint of heart.
Realistically, you've got to manage the whole patch. And if you start attending jobs yourself as a primary unit, you might be able to, you might throw away those other responsibilities you've got. So you really got to balance that. Like, what am I getting myself into? Can I still manage the patch? Can I still put some work into this? If I am going to do that, I'll always notify up and say, mate, I'm going to this job because it needs someone to go to it. Just so you know, boss, I'm out there, keep an ear on the radio in case I'm pretty busy. And sometimes I'll step in and say, yeah, okay, we'll do that for you. Or they'll get another sergeant to come in and cover you.
When a shift is extremely busy, a 251 sergeant may look to their counterpart back at the office, known as a section sergeant, for assistance. The section sergeant's job is to supervise police in the station and to oversee the custody and interview processes that happen there.
I know that if I'm sitting in the office and I'm a section sergeant and I'm not necessarily performing the 251 role, if I hear the 251's busy and he or she's at a job, I'll quite often volunteer and say, look, I'll come out, I'll take over your patch whilst you're dealing with that. When you're back and ready, you can have the patch back and I'll go back to being the section sergeant. I think we've got to work a little bit more logically, and we've probably got to face up to the fact that sometimes we've got a lot of work in our plate and we've got to share it around a bit more.
Now, I'm about to intercept this van. I am 100 metres south of Centenary Drive on Marine Drive. So I'm going to attempt to intercept.
Leave that 251 Mill Park, Epic 311 copy.
There's an art to running these operations from a moving police car.
Vehicle pulling over, stand by. 251, away.
Direction?
Southbound, Marine Drive, in pursuit.
While Dan is busy making decisions on the move, a member at Mill Park Police Station comes up on air with more information about the job.
Mill Park 950.
950 go.
Complaining. 4 males, 3 of them have possible handguns.
Commander 251.
Pindari. We're heading eastbound in Pindari. Stand by. Now, southbound after Phillip Drive.
It was time for a change of tactics after Dan and his offsider lost sight of the black van.
Just any other units in the vicinity, if I can have them in here, because I have lost them. For the purpose of the exercise, I will 7 up because I'm no longer in the sight of them. But let's flood the area. If CERT is monitoring and Canine is monitoring, can I have them in the area fixed?
Not prepared to give up on the chance to catch some crooks, Dan created a dragnet around the offender's vehicle, and sooner or later, they would drive into it.
Canine 203. Search the yards of 42 and 44, I think it is.
40 minutes after it began, Dan's pursuit was over. The offenders abandoned the car, but they couldn't shake the canine units.
Got one under arrest at this stage, possibly another.
The first night shift that I was on when I came out to Greensborough, Dan was a 251 over in Darebin, and he ran a pursuit, and I was like mind blown, without sounding like a fangirl. I was like, I want to be him when I grow up, because his radio comms were sharp, and it was 3 words at a time. Murder 251. I will have these units to this spot. So everyone knew exactly what was going on. He didn't sound stressed at all. And as someone just sort of joining the party, I felt calm, even though I was the 251 of my patch, that he had it under control. Like, he was 100% in control, very calm in a very dynamic situation. He was managing it. He was the one in charge. And there was absolutely no doubt about that.
Okay, I want the 311s, 3 up, paying particular attention to concealment and cover. Approach the court on foot only, with a view to getting observations.
I'm very slow when I talk on the radio. I give directions which are clear. I don't give too much directions. I'm pretty short and sharp with what I want to say. I get ridiculed quite a lot at work because I do that. They find it quite funny, but there is method in my madness. I don't want to have to come up 3 or 4 times to say the same thing. So really, really important.
As a 251 sergeant, there is no typical shift. Whether you're on day or night shift, it's about being prepared for every outcome and knowing your patch and your troops.
I've had the luxury of being in the division a little bit longer now, so I tend to know most of the people that we're working with. So that's really helpful. For me, knowing their personalities or knowing their backgrounds, that person's got SES experience. So if I have something that's emergency management driven, that's not my wheelhouse, but I know it's his. So I'm going to ring that kid and go, hey, can you come into the office? Can you be my 251 driver for a little while and you're going to help me run this? Or, knowing that person's really good with psych patients or that person's really good with family violence. If you've got a unit that is not necessarily tailored to that job, you're still going to send them anyway because you may not have another unit. But if you've got a choice, sending someone who has a background in that particular area is really helpful. I think this role is a real privilege. Not only do we get to be part of the best and worst days of the community's lives, but as a sergeant, we also get to be there to support and educate and develop our staff, our troops. It's kind of a little bit like being a parent, and you raise your troops and you raise them up and you give them good skills and you teach them good lessons, and then they go on and be amazing police officers themselves, which that's a real privilege, I think.
You do protect the troops. You're that layer between the troops and the bosses. So the bosses will come and kick me in the bum, and then I go and kick the troops in the bum. But the troops know it's coming from me and not higher up. But I used to make a joke of putting my arms out here and saying to the troops, this is where you fit. You're under here. I'm going to take all the shit from upstairs, but you do what I say when I tell you to do it. I really like that because you're sort of seen as that middle management, but not only that, you're still on the front line with the troops. You're still going to the jobs with them. You're still helping them out. So there's a lot of credibility in that.
At work, Dani is part of Victoria Police's peer support program. She's one of about 800 employees across the state who have undertaken special training to recognise signs and symptoms of stress in their colleagues. These peers can provide a listening ear and practical help, such as referrals to professional support services when required. Outside work, Dani is studying part-time for a psychology degree, which has helped her manage the demands of her role.
I've always wanted to do a psych degree, and I like understanding what makes people tick. So understanding the behaviour of an individual, what's behind that, and how I can use that knowledge, I suppose, to actually get a better result, whether that's with my staff or whether that's with offenders or whether that's with psych patients out in the community. Just having that little bit extra knowledge and understanding, I feel like it helps me. So understanding those signs that things are starting to crack a little bit, when to pull back. And I suppose, at jobs, to recognise those signs of stress. So, the adrenaline, the fuzzy hearing, that sick feeling in your gut or the jitteriness. I think as a manager to actually be able to recognising the troops when they are barreling towards making bad decisions. I see that as my role as a 251, to actually be able to be that oversight and say, hey, I'm just going to pull you back out of this one. Let's get somebody else to step in. Or be that calm presence, hopefully over the radio, that anchors them into the moment. Let's make these decisions. Oh, I need you to do this, this, this and this.
The communication between the 251 sergeant and their troops does not end with operations on the road. The sergeant is often the first to notice when a member is struggling under the weight of their duties.
So we had a young fellow who suicided, and we had to obviously make those death notifications to the family. We'd attended the parents of the young guy, their address, the family home, and they weren't home, but the younger sibling of that deceased male was home. Obviously, we didn't want to tell a 16-year-old that her brother just died. So we sort of tiptoed around that, where's mum, dad, rah, rah. We ended up finding dad and delivering that death notice. But in the meantime, the mum had got wind of it, and they'd been searching for this kid for sort of the last 12 hours. So she knew something was wrong, or had an inkling something was wrong, and rang the local police station and was quite hysterical. Where's my son? Is he okay? Is he okay? Is he okay? And one of the van members had to do the death notice over the phone and say to her, look, I'm terribly sorry, your son's passed away, which she was hysterical, obviously. And it's not ideal. We don't like doing death notices over the phone for obvious reasons. And, you know, we'd done the debrief and all that sort of stuff. And it was a couple of months later that he came up and said, oh, Dan, have you got a second? And I said, yeah. And he said, I just want, do you remember that job where we had to do the death notice over the phone? I said, yeah. And he said, look, I still hear her screaming every now and again. And I said, oh my gosh, like that's, like, are you okay? So we sat down, we had a quick chat about it. He said, yeah, he goes, it'll, you know, I might be driving to a job and I just get it, like it just comes back to me. He said, or I'll be going home and I'll make a cup of tea and I just hear her screaming on the phone. I said, yeah, look, that sounds like early PTSD signs, mate. So let's, do you want some help with that? Can I get you hooked into services? He wasn't in a position to make that phone call and didn't want to talk to his wife about it. He said, I don't want to talk to anyone about this because I don't want to put it on anyone. It just kind of seems, you know, it was months ago, but it just seems like I should be over this, but I just don't know what's happening. So I made that phone call to welfare, put in that referral. They called him. He went and did 1 or 2 sessions with a psychologist who explained the reasoning and why his brain was processing it that way. And it was good as gold. Came to me a couple of months later and we checked in and I said, hey, how you going? And he said, yep, don't hear her screaming anymore. The psych really put it in perspective for me. And now I can actually talk to my wife and say to her, this is what I was going through. He said, but, you know, that's, you know, I feel like I've cleared that one out of my closet and it was all good. So, yeah, that was a nice moment to know that A, that he could actually come and speak to me and just approach me about that, but B, I could actually connect him into services and get him the help.
Dan's method as a 251 relies on preparation, knowing what troops he has on hand and their capabilities.
We're probably more scrutinised now than we ever have been. So when you're running your patch, you're trying to protect your members while still provide an excellent service to the community. You're trying to make sure that their adrenaline isn't getting the better of them. They're not taking any unnecessary risks. They're responding to the jobs correctly. When they're at the jobs, they're doing the right thing. You're constantly getting phone calls. So you try and understand what it is that they're asking you and try and give them the right advice so that they are doing the right thing. So when they go into the domestic, they might ask you, look, should we take out an intervention order about this one? Should we take out a complaint? Or what's the right course of action? So you want to give them the right advice and you want to stop them from maybe taking too many risks when they're getting involved with a car or maybe about to engage in a pursuit or maybe about to go and see the violent offender one up. You know, what can we put into place to stop all that from happening? What level of service are you going to provide? And I'm a fan of, if you go to a job and then half an hour later that job pops up again, guess what? You're going back because you didn't solve it. I want it solved. Go back and see what else you can do. I'm not going to give that job to another unit to try and fix something that you may have had a look at in the first instance and done right the first time. So if I get a second call to an address, I'm more inclined to attend that myself and just think, what have we missed here? Why are we getting a second call? What's happened? Or could the members have done something a little bit differently that may have prevented that second call? A lot of the time you just want to find a unit to get to the job. And then you're trying to juggle checking the job itself. You'll read it yourself and you'll say, oh, I really need someone to go to this. This is a pretty serious domestic and the bloke's still there. We need to go and talk to him. But you might not have a unit, so you've got to juggle and try and figure out where am I going to get one from. Do I borrow from, do I ring Dani and say, hey, can I have a van to come over here and do this? Or do I just pop it on hold for the next 10 minutes, hoping that one of my vans will come free? Or do I stretch up north and ask the country station to come and give us a hand? So it's a big juggling act. And you've got in the back of the mind, how long can I hold it for before it becomes a real issue? As time progresses, you might want to default to the senior side and say, hey, mate, I'm giving you a buzz because it looks like I've lost my units and I don't think I'm going to get another one back for 3 to 4 hours. So just let you know, I'll pop the jobs on hold for as long as I can, but we might need to think about starting to look at other resources. Can we get people up from the city? Can we get people out to do this? You just got to try and juggle as much as you can.
As a 251 sergeant, the nightmare scenario is to lose contact with members on the ground. Everyone must be accounted for at all times.
It is terrifying. If you've lost a member, your brain's going 100 mile an hour thinking, where is he? What's happened? Is he in an alleyway somewhere? Has he been shot? Has he been killed? Is he not coming up because he physically can't come up? So yeah, that's all running through your head. And at the same time, you're still managing the job. You've still got to find him. And you've got everyone coming up in the air because everyone wants to help when you've got a missing member. It's terrifying, but at the same time, that's when you're really working at 100%. You're trying to calm everyone else down because your goal is to find the guy. We'll defrag later, but for now, let's go 100%. Let's find him. Let's find out what's happened. Let's rehabilitate the scene. But yeah, you're right. You're inside. You're really, really worried because that's a really, really bad day. There was an example I think I gave a while back. I was at Northcote as a sergeant. One of my units was engaging with a male who presented to be suicidal on the train track. They removed him from the train track. He armed himself, approached the members. The members challenged him. He dropped the fence post and then ran away. The two members on the unit, one was an experienced senior constable, one was a very junior constable, got split up. And we couldn't find the male for quite some time. I think it took us about half an hour in the end. That's probably as stressed as I get in this job, knowing that you've got a member missing and not knowing what's happened to him. The other police officer didn't know the patch very well at all. She only just started, couldn't find a street sign, came up the radio, was quite visibly distressed. The stress had gotten to her and couldn't form a sentence together at all. Air Wing were out and about to give us a hand, but they didn't have a starting point really well because she didn't know what side of the track she was on. I was looking at the original job to try and piece it all together and then got on the road myself. We finally did find him a long time later, and he was a martial artist, so when he engaged with this guy the second time, he put him in a lock and a hold and held him down on a nature strip, but just couldn't access his radio. He knew it was only a matter of time before we found him. For him, it wasn't a big deal. For me, it was the biggest deal in the world because we had a potential member missing. And when that happens, every man and his dog wants to get on the radio and tell you what to do. When really all you want to do is to put a search in place and find him as quickly as you can. So, yeah, it's something that I don't like. I don't like losing communications with members. I'm not afraid now to say I've been involved in plenty of incidents that I look back on and go, wow. I mean, I reckon if I think back, there's at least 3 occasions when I think I could have been killed in this job. I remember doing a search warrant on a bloke that was dealing a lot of drugs. We didn't know it at the time, but this drug dealer and his partner had been run through by other crooks and had their drugs stolen and got beaten up probably about a couple of weeks earlier. I was the doorman, so I was qualified to kick the door in, which I did that, which meant that I was the last person through the door. So I'm opening the door for the rest of the detectives to go in. So I was the last person through the door and everyone was chasing the guy down the main hallway. I saw a lady sitting on the couch and I thought, well, I better go and arrest her because if I follow suit, she's going to run away. She was sitting on the couch and she just moved her right arm down to the couch, pulled up a firearm, pointed it straight at me and started to squeeze the trigger. And I said, oh, fuck, I'm dead. It was only when I got closer and she saw the police sign that she actually dropped the firearm and said, oh, shit, I'm sorry, I didn't realise you're the police. I quickly handcuffed her and grabbed the firearm and pulled the magazine out, had a look, and there was one in the spout. And in hindsight, I did 101 things wrong. I was just lucky to get away with it. Every now and then I think about that, and I use that in context when I do search warrant briefings. I say to people, you don't know what you're going to walk into.
Being the fun police is not great, but if at the end of the day it keeps the troops and the community safe, then that's, I kind of think, our role. But yeah, people do get tunnel vision. You are full of adrenaline, full of the moment, really excited, ready to get out there and have a crack. But sometimes it's not the best decision to be made.
Life experience is a big advantage for our 2 sergeants. Finding her destiny in Victoria Police came at a later age for Dani.
I think it is that experience. I'm not 21, rushing in through life, thinking I'm invincible, bulletproof, ready to roll. I've been married and divorced. I've had a couple of kids. I've managed people outside of sort of this environment. So I have those skills to actually bring to the plate. And, I think that with age comes a little bit of wisdom. I worked in a private investigation firm for 12 years as a family business and also worked as a wedding reception venue manager. I think working at a wedding reception venue, you're dealing with bridezillas. So that probably prepared me for working with people who are a little bit highly strung. And that, I suppose, that customer service level basis as well helped. And working in private investigation for 12 years was really interesting. We used to do a lot of pre-checks, sort of cold call work, and we didn't have the tools and the database that were available to me, that are available to us now, I suppose, as a police officer. So that, I suppose, helped tweak my abilities to think outside the square and try and glean information legally in a roundabout way. So I've always ended up in management roles, whether that's just a natural bossiness maybe, but I like that leadership role.
Yeah, I was in the army very early when I was 18, and one of the blokes I was in the army with had joined the police force, and I actually picked up an application that sat on my desk at home for 4 years. I'd filled it out. I just didn't hand it in. The first step back in those days was you had to go and see the local senior sergeant, and you'd have a chat to him. And that first interview, he would say, he'd put his opinion as to whether he thought you'd make a good police officer. That was the first step. And it was an easy step. I just never took it. I thought, I'm not sure about the fire brigade or the police force. I'll wait and see. And I'm glad that I went down this path. I always wanted to be a detective. I thought I'd be a career detective. I did become a detective. I became a divisional detective. I would have been happy to retire as a detective, to be honest. It was my detective sergeant who said to me, you need to take the next step, hurry up and move on. You've got a lot to give. I think you've given this enough. Maybe you should try some upgrading, and I was dead against it.
For Dan, upgrading meant returning to uniform and working as an acting sergeant in a suburban station.
After my first month of upgrading, I rang my boss and said, can I come back? This is not for me. And he said, I reckon it is for you. Give it another 2 months, and if you still feel the same way, you're welcome back. And after 2 months, I rang him up and said, no, I want to stay longer. Can I keep going with the upgrading? Hey, I've got a lot to give here, because these kids don't really know a lot about the investigative side of things. I could probably offer them a lot. And my senior sergeant at the time was a great man, retired now, still keep in contact with him. He said, no, you're doing a really, really good job. You're great with the troops. I want you here and I want you to go back. So just hearing those words, I thought, yeah, maybe I'll hang around.
The success of a 251 sergeant is measured over time, not in a single shift. It's a role that demands consistency in judgment and decision-making.
So no matter how bad the last shift was, you hope you shred that from your brain, and you just keep going, and you turn up, give another briefing, and you hope that you don't carry too much from the shift previous into your new shift. Sometimes you'll get the reattendance of the same job that you just want to solve. That's the best feeling, if you can actually go to a job and solve it so it doesn't become a problem for the next shift or the next day or 3 weeks down the track. That's great. Sometimes we do reattend the same family violence incidents, the same domestics, the same issues, and that becomes a problem. And if we're not solving it in the first place, they become more difficult to solve. And ideally, you'll want every reported crime that hits your desk to be solved, so you're not returning.
At one time, Dan dreamed of finishing up as a detective sergeant in the homicide squad. Now he plans to stay on the coalface as a uniformed sergeant as long as he can.
Well, I've got another 10 years, so hopefully I can do it till I'm 60. I think you grow up in this job, as you do with many jobs. So when I first joined, I would have hated to have managed me when I first joined the job, because I was a little prick. I thought I knew everything. I think I'm still providing value in the role that I'm doing, and I'm getting a lot of reward from doing it. I love being part of someone else's journey. I love training someone and then having them reflect on what I've taught them. I walked in on a detective sergeant downstairs one day talking about me to one of the troops, saying, Dan took me on my first ever search warrant, and we did this and we did that. And the Connie said, oh, well, it doesn't sound like he's changed much. He's still the same as he was back then. And the detective sergeant was a constable when I first met him. And it was nice to hear that he had a little story to tell about me. And I look at that and think, well, hopefully I had some positive influence on his career. And that's what I'm trying to instill on some of the people. I might not make it to Detective Senior Sergeant at Homicide Squad, but maybe some of the people that I've helped in this journey might get there one day and might reflect and say, hey, that guy was a pretty big help to me, and he was not a bad sergeant.
While Dani's career path is still unfolding, she says this frontline experience of managing staff and running jobs is a challenging but highly rewarding experience.
There's days where I go home and I say, yeah, the universe has put me in the right place. I definitely feel this is my calling, yeah. It's when I suppose you, at the end of the shift and you go home and you question yourself, and I'm an overanalyzer, so I rethink things through 10 times, and then one of the crew will come up to you and confide in you something, or they're worried about something and they haven't gone to another sergeant, they've come to you to talk to that. That's a bit of validation, I think, for me to be able to go, yeah, I'm actually in the right place. I am helping my crew. I am helping the community. Yeah, it's nice. It's a nice feeling.
A reminder that if any of the themes in this episode have had an impact on you, please call Lifeline on 13 11 14. If life is in danger, call 000.
That was the final episode of Season 3. Stay tuned in the future for Season 4. Police Life, The Experts is a Victoria Police production. Your host is Belinda Batty. This episode was written by Adam Shand and Ros Jaguar. It was produced by Adam Shand, Jessie Ray McCann, Nadine Lyford, Cassandra Stangy and Danielle Ford. The senior producer was Ros Jaguar. Audio production and original music by Matt Dwyer. Theme song by Vyacheslav Dragunov. Executive produced by Beck Angel. This podcast was created by the Media, Communications and Engagement Department at Victoria Police. To learn more about the work of Victoria Police, go to police.vic.gov.au.